So I've just picked up a couple of journals that I made a long time ago, and I'm going to put them underneath the. You'll get to see a little bit of evolution of Jack, right? But what I wanted to do is to use these as a tool for discussing how to give feedback on a journal page. And what the general kind of big picture here is, I think you may have heard me discuss this before, but it's really easy for people to get in knots about, I have to make pretty pictures. And and we can, as educators, we can subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, reinforce that and put even more pressure on people that actually this is about making pretty pictures. And that can just kind of block people from getting anything down on the page. So when I am giving feedback to people, my focus is not about giving a critique of artwork. Because what that does is really says, like, oh, this really is about making pretty pictures. I look at the ideas, and I also look at ways that people are documenting information. If you are separately teaching an art class, there it's appropriate to give feedback on aspects of pretty pictureness, right? So if you are, so with my daughters, we will regularly sit down and we do an art class, right? I say, I'm going to teach you something about drawing. And then in that, we work on drawing things, and then we put up our stuff and I give them feedback on drawing things. And so it's compartmentalizing this idea of let's work on drawings. But when we're out nature journaling, I don't talk about pretty pictures and give drawing feedback. And just kind of a good example of this is if I were to pick up somebody's journal and go like, oh, you know what? Actually, platypus isn't spelled that way. Wah, 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 right? There's a big wet blanket, and that's kind of not the point. But so the point in giving feedback on the journal isn't about the mechanics of spelling or grammar. It's not about the mechanics of drawing pictures. It's about our thinking and our engagement with the world and ways of recording that. So let's just look at a concrete example here. And here we go. All right, I'm going to spotlight this for just a moment. So here is an old Nature Journal. So this is going back to 1985 in the Wayback Machine here. And let me see if I can get this. All right. So I am a student in my first year at UC Berkeley, and this is my journal. And so what I'm doing is you can see I'm using pictures and words. I'm throwing in some landscapes. I've got things that are actual size. So if I were looking, actually, this is this out of focus for you too? So maybe
slightly. The words are difficult for me to see, but the drawings are quite clear. So the words are difficult to see.
Let me see if I can get this.
Now I can see the words a lot better, but the page, There we go.
For some reason, I'm having focus difficulty. And let me back that up. All right. So here are these little sketches. So one, if I were to look at this with a student, what I want to do is either notice an observation that they made and reflect that observation back to them, or what I can do is to notice a strategy that they're using for recording information. So let's start with the second one first. I can say like, oh, this is a great idea. I see that you've drawn the little spiderling life-size here. So here's a life-size spider, and that way you can that really gives me a sense of scale. That's really useful. Right? And so instead of saying, oh, I really like the way you drew that, I'm saying that's a useful tool, a useful way of recording information. Here is watching some little jays, and I can say like, oh, you don't need to color all these, do you? Just having one where you drop in the color on it, that gives me a lot of information about all these other sketches and drawings. Huh, that's a really great strategy, kind of time saving in the field. So again, in both those situations, I'm noticing a way that somebody recorded information, and if that's useful, then I'm going to reflect that back to them, and that's going to encourage them to use that same strategy again and again and again. Another way of giving feedback is, I'm just going to move down here. So here is young possum climbed out of a hole near where the chicks were feeding. It was immediately set upon by two loud adults who drove it back into the hole, and that's at 2:20. Now, what I can also do is just give feedback on or kind of engage about what is going on here. So here's just kind of more, note-taking strategies. You included the time. That's really relevant. Good job thinking to kind of quantify when it is. The more specific we often are, the more useful these notes can be later. And look at how drawing and words go so well together. Here, looking at the drawing, I can see that this thing is really in the face of this thing. I can see exactly how close they are. I don't have that information written here, but because I've got this little sketch, then I can really, these two things really support each other. So I really like the way you're using words and pictures together. Another way I could kind of engage with this, so all of those so far are on noticing kind of a journaling strategy that they're doing and reinforcing that, kind of supporting them in doing that again. Another thing that you could do is just kind of get into the land of making observations. And when I'm making observations, I can just sort of be an observer and think about this just as a naturalist. So I just kind of come to this as a naturalist. They're saying, I observed this. And then I can think like, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder, what I'll often do is I'll look at the student's page. And we've talked before about the idea of I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. Are people familiar with that idea? So those three prompts, those are my critical three prompts. You can do, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of looking at somebody else's journal. So just go, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of on their journal. So, I notice would be, is like, I noticed that the possum is using a hole right here by the foot of this building. I wonder if if there are spaces under building, and that's kind of a neat way to access this. So I'm just noticing that this drawing is done. There's a drawing of the hole right next to where these structures are. And I noticed and I tied that to an I wonder. And all of a sudden you're in a discussion about things based on that student's journal page. I wonder if possums eat jay chicks. I wonder if this baby possum was a threat, or is it just sort of a general response to anything that could be possibly cat-like? But I wonder if these guys in particular might feed on those chicks. That's interesting, right? So what you're seeing there is it's a question that you're asking based on what you see. So if you see something and you come up with an I wonder based on the observation that you're making. Or I could do an it reminds me of. And so I could say, this, it just sort of reminds me of, like, I've seen all sorts of other animals. Lots of animals seem to have this parent instinct. And I know that even when I walk around with my own daughters, and I see my sort of level for what is a potential threat is much higher, and I'm much more likely to kind of respond to a situation as if this is a serious threat if my kids are around. And it's interesting to see that same, this jay is acting exactly the same way that I do. So what I'm doing there is just doing an it reminds me of off of a journal page that they had. So let's just go for, I'm going to go for a different page here. And what, let's see, what would be kind of a fun one for us.
I'm noticing a couple of questions in the chat as well. Katie Eston was asking, Jack, are you giving this feedback in the same, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of framework? And then Catherine Maynor asks, if the student likes what you've noticed and wondered and wants to add to his or her journal, would you encourage adding the teacher's ideas?
Oh, yeah. And because generally when I'm not telling them answers, right? And so I'm not saying, here's the answer to what you're looking at. Generally, what's going on with those sorts of things is I am, I role model. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of all the time. And so if they want to kind of pick up on any of that, you'll find it, sometimes when students are journaling and I walk up to them and they're in the moment, I'll engage with them in I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of discussion about whatever it is they're looking on. And sometimes that gets them to kind of look in more with whatever it is they're doing. Yeah. So here's another page. And what you're, so just take a moment to look at this. Let's see if I can bring this over here. Oh, we're still kind of fuzzy. Why is that? Seems like it slightly kind of rolls as it's focusing it. It gets clearly focused for a second and then decides to focus just slightly out of focus. We'll have to deal with this. All right, so just take a look at this page here and imagine that this is a student's journal. And first we'll look at this top part. And you can look at what's going on or read that.
The writing is just a tiny bit blurry. It's, sorry.
That's hard. Come on.
Sorry, the joys of technology.
Yeah. right? And then down below that is this. And what I'm going to do is put one of you on this, let's kind of take turns. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you folks to give feedback, either a strategy that you see that the person is doing that you want them to continue to do, and you're going to give positive reinforcement to, or I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, about actual observations and things going on the page there. So if you want to take a stab at this, go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead and unmute yourself and give it a try.
Hi, Jack. It's Amaya.
Amaya, how are you doing?
So I'm going to do my little thing and pretend you're a student of mine and give feedback.
Great.
Okay, so I love your page, and I love how you included the bird onto the page, and you didn't just make the page a full map. And I love your legend and your key to the map so you can show what's going on there happening in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Good?
Yeah. So you're pointing out just sort of that you're encouraging them to put a bunch of different stuff together on one page. She's saying, you've included this, and you've also got this with this key. And so she's pointing out the key is a really important part of this, and encouraging them to get sort of a higher concentration of just sort of different elements on a single page. That's great. And sometimes I don't even say, I love this or I like this. I'll just say, like, I notice that you're doing this, right? And then I'll say, that's a good strategy for recording information. Or that's as a scientist, that really allows you to include a lot more different information. So sometimes I will say, I like this or I like that, but you can also do it without any kind of value judgment from you of whether this is that one school of thought is that if we're constantly telling students what we like or don't like, they sometimes may start doing things to get our praise. And as opposed to saying that this is intrinsically a useful strategy, as a scientist. Just a slightly different tweak. Both are good. Just another thing to consider. I like the way you did that, Amaya. All right. So when I'm giving feedback, this was kind of backing up from this. I'm going to just kind of take you folks down kind of memory lane. We're looking at a trip with my dad at his favorite place to go fishing, and it was up in the Fall River in northeastern California, and he would go fishing, and I would walk around and journal. And this was this bend in the river that had all this kind of crazy stuff going on. So here's the teal nest, and these are actually the flowers that I was finding right around there. Here's a drawing of that same teal nest, right? So you can, and here are, let's see, where are they? Yeah, here are the critters I was finding in the water right around there. It's really fun for me now, years later, to open this up, and spending that time with my dad just comes back so vividly, really, really clearly to me. That experience. It's neat to see how that gets kind of, those memories get coded into a journal page. Really fun. So that's just a little bit of thinking about giving feedback. Now let's take a look at the questions here and see if we can get some specific feedback to things. Like I noticed one, it reminds me of. Maybe what we could do is I'm going to encourage people to unmute yourselves. I'm dyslexic, and when I actually try to read what you've written, my brain starts to go. Right. And so maybe what we'll also do is, and some days my brain has a harder time reading than other days, and today is one of those days where my brain is having a hard time reading. So if people have questions, other questions on this, I'm going to encourage people to unmute themselves, and let's maybe open this up to a discussion. It'll be, I might have some ideas, and there also will be some other people online who are also going to have some suggestions and ideas.
I've got one if no one else wants to go first.
Oh, thank you, Amaya.
So I'm curious on how to get kids' attention through the computer. And I'm actually going to do a class through Zoom, and I'm wondering how to get their attention because I did a class out in the field, and that was a lot easier because there's things right in front of them, and now if they're gonna do it, they're gonna do it on the screen. So you have any recommendations for that?
Well, my first thought is to just realize that it is so much easier to engage with other people when you're there in person and face to face. So if you have trouble on this, you're in very good company, because teachers all over the planet right now are going like, how do I engage my students through this screen? A couple of things, suggestions that I have is that when we can think about this screen as our kind of little playground. And so you can do things like if I do this, right? All of a sudden I've kind of changed the visual emphasis, and all of a sudden we're kind of leaning in and like, here's a secret. And when somebody does this, what we tend to listen. We're like, oh, here comes something. And so if you're presenting through this medium and you're doing it all from here, what you see is what most people do kind of for the standard thing, then you don't have, it would be just as if you were kind of sitting in a chair talking to somebody. But if oh yeah, okay, hold on, like, because I'll get, you can engage somebody. Now you saw me go pick this thing up, and now you're really, what I did is think of this as your theater, right? And so you're going to try to play in this theatrical space. Other things that you can do is you can bring objects that are going to do some of the talking or engaging for you. So if you have if you can hold an object up to the screen, or if you, all right. This was the dead woodpecker that had completely decomposed, and I could find its tongue bones. Right? So isn't that crazy? The tongue bones wrap around the head. They're forked, and then they come together and support this one big bristly tongue thing. Isn't that crazy? So you see how I'm kind of engaging something with something here. So you can use if you're teaching journaling, you can be using your journals, and then notice that it's more engaging. Which is more fun, this, or you're peeking around here. So that's just a little bit of theatrics. Just thinking about this screen is your stage. And how are you going to play on that stage? But also have a thick skin, because you know what? If you know this, it is hard. It's really hard to connect with people through this medium. And so if you have a hard time with that, don't beat yourself up. You don't go like, oh, I'm a terrible teacher. No, it's that you know, so much of our engaging with people is, you know, body language and connection and being there in that physical space. We don't have any of that working for us here. And also, you might think about when people are in a Zoom meeting, what they tend to do is they think to themselves, all right, I'm here, but only kind of, because you know, I'm going to go over and get myself a cup of coffee, right? And so you'll constantly see stuff like that in the middle of your Zoom meeting. You're just like, you know, and
Yeah, I just got up to get my cat from tearing up something, so I had to leave too.
well, yeah, you know, because you know, life is going on around us, and you know, we're surviving here in COVID land, and but also these Zoom classes are now becoming more mainstream. So it's not, when they first happened, they're like, oh my gosh, look, there's all these people here, and like they can see their faces. Oh, that's really neat. And people look at it, and now people are like, okay, it's a Zoom meeting, and then they're gonna go like, okay, I'm gonna do this so that, you know, I can go get my cup of coffee. And you know, it's hard teaching to these little screens, right? It's weird. And so if you were actually teaching in front of those people, they wouldn't go up and get their coffee. They would wait to the coffee break. But it just seems to be part of like Zoom meeting culture, is that people will kind of black out their screen and kind of go do other things. And then there'll be the person who they left their microphone on, and you know, you know, you're in the middle of something, and then you hear kind of this voiceover kind of going like, oh yeah, I heard about that on TV. And then you realize that people are having a totally different conversation, and that they're not kind of engaged with you anymore. You're kind of like, where's my mute all button? I don't know where it is.
And also too, oh, sorry, you were saying that, and it made me think too, we're also not in a classroom space. A lot of us are you know, learning and teaching both of those things from home, which means that if you live with other people, they don't necessarily have the same boundaries that you do, because you're not in a classroom, you're not separate from everything that's happening at home, which means, like, for example, a few minutes ago, I muted my screen because my son came out here and had a tantrum, and I was trying to say, like, I'm trying to co-host, and he's kicking things over, and I'm like, oh, crumbs. And people have no sense of boundaries when you're at home.
Yeah,
so that's another thing, is that people might be, and it might have nothing to do with you, it just might be that they don't have the space that they usually have when they're focused and on you too.
So I got to get in the mindset. I'm homeschooled, so I have this mindset already that I'm at home. This is my school environment too, but now I got to be like, this is everybody's new environment.
Yeah. So who else has some ideas and thoughts here for Amaya about things that kind of can help you engage with people if you are teaching in this sort of strange virtual space?
There's a comment by Abel SBH, and he says that he or she have said that they've noticed that their students really like it when they're Zooming from outside. I hope I said that right, Abel. Sorry, getting used to reading these things.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, so that's an interesting thought. Really sort of change this up. Like this thing behind me, if I were outside, an adventure might happen at any moment. Does anybody else have any other strategies?
You see, my concern is that we're not supposed to encourage kids to go outside, technically. So we got very clear guidance, so we need to be careful. So you're not sure you want to say, you know, go outside, just look in the grass and explore, but you don't want to be slapped on your hands and told that you're not supposed to tell kids to go and explore. They're supposed to be in isolation. So, okay, so let's isolate. How do you do that? How do you combine? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I saw one strategy that somebody had on that I thought was useful. And that was there was this, my daughters were, they had this science class that they were doing through online meetings, and they would sort of have these video talks from this person who's trying to get them to go outside and look at the weather. But the person was always just very careful to just sort of say, with your parent or guardian or with their permission, go do this. So they're just sort of reminding people just to sort of check in with the adults that are responsibly managing that situation before kind of going out and engaging, and then leaving it up to that family. What are the boundaries that are appropriate? So perhaps, I totally agree with you. One of the side effects of COVID is we're all just sitting inside, and the more that we can get out is great. But you do want to make sure that people are kind of getting out with appropriate social distancing. If you're in places where parks are opening up, a lot of the data says that being outdoors is great. You've got UV light bathing everything, better wind currents, sort of being around other people in an enclosed space, or worse with recirculating air, not so much, right? But yeah, there's a lot of data that is saying that sort of being outside is a really, really good thing. When we are kind of advising this as educators to our students, I do think that it's going to be really appropriate to suggest to them that they want to check in with the whatever supervising adult is kind of managing things. They did a good job of that on. It doesn't have to be overboard. They're saying like with your parent or with their permission, just kind of go out and do whatever it is, and then we'll leave that to them and hope that they maintain appropriate social distancing. Does anybody else have any suggestions for Amaya about using this space that she has, her stage?
I have an idea. I can kind of agree with what Katie's saying before I talk about Amaya. She is talking possibly about not in California. California is opening up, and lots of parts of California have open space that you can go on porches and stuff. So to address both of you, I am a retired teacher, and I've taught kindergarten, first, second, third grade most of my life. And novelty is the word I think you're looking for. So however you bring something to a student, there is something that in your teaching that has to be novel in each approach, and there's something that needs to be structured. But it is often the novelty, whether it's a puppet, a book, a picture, it's the novelty that's going to draw their attention. And then when the attention is brought in, then you can go back to the structure that you want to teach them. I hope that's helpful.
That's a very good thought. Yeah, and Sydney agrees, don't you? Oh yeah, absolutely. I just happen to have my sock here, and seems to work. Yeah, the other day I was teaching a class on drawing things that were moving, and I looked over, and my daughter had her stuffed cat there, so I brought the cat on board and had it move around, and that seems to be a good. Do you agree? Yeah. Yeah. So I like that novelty thought, and maybe I'll have to make more use of sock puppets, because I've always got these socks lying around in my office. you know what I need? I need just googly eyes for my sketching socks, and then there'll be some next level sketching socks. We shall see. Any other thoughts or ideas?
I'm seeing some other good thoughts here. Beth is saying, giving them opportunities to talk to each other and socialize a bit over Zoom. And then if they're older, you can let them pair share in breakout rooms. I think, I don't know much about the Zoom, but I know that Zoom has a breakout room feature as well, which is kind of good for talking about things. So I think Beth has a good idea. And then Rachel is saying, do you expect students to share their journal entries through Zoom? And have you been able to give effective feedback to students that way?
I can give a few thoughts on that. First of all, with the pair share, that is an incredibly useful strategy. If I ask a group of students any question, very often the response is silence. But if you first, and it's so much easier in real life, if you just say, all right, I'd like you to turn and talk to the person next to you. I'll often have somebody pair up with a stranger, and like, here's your topic for conversation. You've got 2 minutes, discuss. You have them discuss it. And then you say, all right, now let's get everybody back together. What were some of the more interesting ideas that came to you or that you heard your partner say? And then all of a sudden, everybody's sharing. And so it really brings up. So some students that need time to think and process before there's like that answer. And if you just drop questions on a group, then only the kids who are just, they're really good at like, I've got something fast, right? And they're always the same kids, right? But you give other people, or also let's say there's students with challenges with language learning, right? This gives them a time to kind of get ideas. They've got really good ideas too, but they didn't really get the question, and then it gives them more time to kind of formulate a response. So that is a really useful teaching strategy. The breakout rooms is a really good idea with that. With looking at student work online, yes, you can do that. And you're not going to be probably be able to look at everybody's work if it's a larger group. If it's a smaller group, then you could, and you can kind of give people opportunities to, hold stuff up to their screen, and you can give them feedback about it. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're using some examples of those to give some specific targeted feedback, and you'd be giving the kind of feedback that you're going to hope to be kind of generally applicable for more people. So for instance, I'm saying like, oh, I see that you're recording the date, and I like how you're using little icons for your weather there, right? That's a really useful strategy for showing that information. Then everybody's going like, oh, I should have the date. And even those people who don't have the date, they're not off screen, they're putting the date on their journal page right then. And then they're going to have that on future pages. If you have a large classroom, very often there are ways that you can submit things to teachers. Teachers have ways of kind of getting through whatever system is being used in your school of collecting student homework, the teacher being able to look at that. Then the teacher in their next Zoom meeting can put up a slide on the school discussion, and here is a picture of a journal page. You can often do this anonymously, so you don't have the student's name attached to it, and point out strategies that person is doing, and then people like, I want to be, on that, and just sort of make sure that when you do that you don't just select out all the ones that have pretty pictures. There's a real natural tendency for us to do that. We're attracted to pretty pictures, right? That one, like, oh, right? But look for one like, wow, this student really asked a cool question. Check out this question, right? I love kind of asking students like, what would you like? The fact that you came up with this question amazes me. what would have to be going on inside somebody's mind to even come up with a question like this? It's just got layers. It's not the question. In order to get this question, this is the question that's behind the question, right? Now this is, and then you kind of get into that question, and then students are looking at this and they're like, oh wow, it's really not about making pretty pictures. But you see how I just leaned in, and that got your attention, right? So that would be some other strategies. Are there any other things that people are seeing?
To go with that as well, if you have only a certain number of students, and I love that sock puppet, if you have only a certain number of students as well, then you can also pay careful attention to make sure that you select different students each time, so that way the students who are a little bit more reticent and who aren't maybe as assertive, you can make sure that you point out things about them that they appreciate too, and that can sort of help grow their self-confidence as well, because it's not just about nature journaling, it's also about growing them as people, as students who believe in themselves. And a lot of kids struggle with that, even if they're not willing to say it out loud, just as a thought. Also too, speaking of confidence, Janet had a good question earlier, and that's how do you create enthusiasm for drawing? And that makes, I like Janet's question a lot, because it makes me wonder too about the students who, as we know, have been told, speaking of pretty pictures, oh, I'm not a great drawer or whatever. How do we get them to even start? So.
Yeah. Well, first, just about kind of being inclusive of everybody else, right? That's also really important to think about in terms of equity in the classroom, because we tend, the people who kind of like, it tends to be very often white males in our society are trained to be assertive, and a lot of people in other cultures that may not be sort of what is prized or what is encouraged, and so they can be either left behind, or after being kind of looked over a bunch of times, people will stop raising their hands. So being intentional about what is my personal implicit bias? Do I tend to call on people who have skin color like mine a little bit more often, because it's just might be a little bit subtly more comfortable for me? Or that person, the kid with the glasses, you think is more intelligent because all the kids who are intelligent in movies are wearing glasses, right? And so just sort of like there are these weird little biases that we have. So just being aware of that, and as Ivea was saying, just make sure that you're being fair. That's huge. Let's also talk about getting people excited about drawing, and drawing is not their bag. My first strategy on this is that to make it really clear that it's not about the drawing. We're using drawing the way that scientists use drawing, which is as a tool to help us think and to show our ideas and to show our observations. And if you get a pretty picture, that's great. If not, that's great. Because that's not what we're about here. But we do want to use the drawings in order to we want to use those drawings in order to convey information and to help us think while we're actually making our observations. So for when you're out there and you're introducing these activities, I make that really clear. And then when I am looking at student work, I do the same thing. So I'm not saying, oh, great job, you drew a really pretty picture. I go like, wow, that's interesting. I wonder why, could it be that, this reminds me of, or this is an interesting strategy that you used. So I'm using those ideas which we talked about at the start. Those aren't saying good job, pretty picture. So I de-emphasize the fact that we're doing pictures, and it's about observations. And then when somebody records an observation, I get really excited about the observation. So I'm naturally excited about, like, that was a really, you know, important thing to notice, really good noticing. And then look at the strategy that she used to show that observation. And somebody says, this doesn't have to be like just this simple diagram. It shows the spacing of where the deer were relative to the to the creek, or whatever it is that you're looking at. It recorded that information, and it did that successfully. And so I get excited about the observations. I also get excited. Very often I will look at the page where a student is the drawer. Right, this is the person who always gets positive feedback for their drawing. And I'm looking at their page, and I will probably comment on that person's a written note that they made. Or if they measured something or timed something, they used numbers to record part of something, but they're so used to getting positive feedback for drawing, because that's their bag. So I'm going to intentionally reinforce, like, you recorded the time that we saw the owl, right? That's that kind of specificity, and using numbers to record those sorts of things. Really good strategy, really good strategy. And then everybody says, like, well, I could do that too, right? So I want to get that kid who's drawing using words and numbers. I want to get the kid who's using words to use pictures and numbers. I want to get usually everybody just using more numbers. Usually there's nobody who's like numbers are my bag and I'm going to be quantifying everything. But I want to get people using words, pictures, and numbers to record everything that they have. And most people come to it with a comfort zone. So start squarely in that comfort zone. Like drawing, I'm scared of drawing. Okay, so your journal can be mostly pictures and counting and timing and tallying things. Great, do that. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is I need you to start looking for ways that you can also use words into what you're doing. So for the kid who's, again, they like drawing, I want to push them to use words. The kid who doesn't like drawing, they can be mostly words, right? But I'm going to now encourage them to, or just start to make a few, is there a simple diagram or a map that you could use to also start to visually show information about what you're seeing? So drawing isn't your comfort zone, that's fine. Can you make a simple diagram that supports what you're writing here? Because really, let's think about what sorts of things are perhaps more easily shown in a simple little diagram. Right? And so start them just with diagrams, maps, where it doesn't have to be as representational, right? It can just be that they have a key and there's a circle wherever this type of lichen shows up on the rock. They don't have to draw the lichen, they just draw the circle, and then they have a key that means that's the light green lichen. And they show the rock and they show that those ones are all over here, and the orange lichens are up on the top of the rock, where the pica and the birds have been peeing and depositing their urea, and that's actually a urea specific lichen that loves kind of going where all the birds pee. Isn't that cool? They actually do that. You can, when you're out in the field, you can tell where the pica are by looking around, where are the orange rocks? And then that's going to be like, anyway. So start them just with diagramming and starting to use visual information. And just reinforce that and reinforce that and reinforce that. And it gets people starting to make little maps and things, and then those get more sophisticated. And then part of that fear starts to go away. Those would be kind of approaches I take. What thoughts do other folks have on the same topic? How can you encourage people, perhaps not just to encourage people on drawing, but to encourage people to explore outside of their comfort bubble?
I'm noticing a good exercise that Janet's just posted, where she says she's going to try to draw a map like yours and then either ask the kids what's happening here or make up something that's happened. So it sounds as though getting kids to like talk about their ideas and think about things, think about just get their minds really working is what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. And that's very often what the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of when we come up on a phenomenon, rather than everybody starting journaling, what we do is we just stand in front of it and I'm there with my daughters and we're looking at it and we're saying out loud, what do I notice? I notice, 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 I wonder, I wonder, I notice, I notice, I notice, I wonder, I wonder. It reminds me of, I notice, I notice, I notice, it reminds me of, I wonder, I notice, I notice, I notice, I notice, I notice. It's just this sort of stream of consciousness riff of stuff. And that gets all the observations into this concrete space. It's much easier then to get them down on paper.
You know, I haven't done what I'm going to talk about in context of nature journaling, but I've done it in relation to art, because I have some perfectionists in my class who really want, as you said, a pretty picture, or they're not trying, or, you know, when when 8-year-olds tell you they're not good at art, you just don't know what to say, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't draw. So what I did, I purposefully created the situation. I put the image of the horse, and I said that you have only, I forgot, I think we really did 5 minutes, that you have only 5 minutes to draw that horse. And you're gonna draw this horse. We actually, with 8, they survived. We drew it 3 times. I said, only 5 minutes, and then that's it, new picture. And it doesn't matter how it looks, it doesn't matter what's gonna be on it, you're just gonna do it again. And you know, they were very surprised. They look at those horses, the same horse, I think they survived for 3. They looked and said, oh, they actually look like horses. And we just had 5. So their perception of the pictures changed. I was surprised. And then they stopped complaining that it's not a good picture. They actually found good things in those 5-minute pictures. And more kids tend to be more willing to actually try after. I was just surprised. But that might be something to break that pretty picture. And everything has to be perfect kind of a habit and thinking.
I like that exercise. That's great. Can anybody add to that or have a different idea that might be useful? What else?
You can show them your old nature journaling pages and show them, hey, you can make progress, pencil miles. I started when I was 10, so I have 6 trees to now actually trees. So you can show them your progress, and I think that inspires them more when you show your progress.
Yeah, what Amaya is getting at here is sort of building into how you present and talk about things, the idea of a growth mindset. And we will actually I think we should spend a whole hour kind of exploring this. And actually, what I'll try to do is try to get an interview with Joe Bowler, who's one of the Stanford researchers who's really pioneering the work in growth mindset. And
yes, please, that would be awesome.
We're down with that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about organizing a conversation with her. I think that would be wonderful, not just for this group, but for the whole Nature Journal.
Oh, all right. Well, tell you what I'll do. I will try to contact her today.
Sweet.
And because it's this critical idea. So Amaya is using herself as the example. So she's saying, look, I was doing this before and now I'm doing this. And you know what? A month from now, I'm going to be doing it better than this because I'm keeping working at it. And that the idea is that we've got skills and those are not fixed traits. They change depending on how much we're working on them. And when kids really adopt that idea, it's incredibly empowering also for adults. It opens the floodgates because it makes sense that you should try. So, what I love that you are kind of embedding that into how you're teaching. That's really high level, important, critical ideas, sort of thinking about that growth mindset. If your students develop a growth mindset, the fear is, that's the most important thing for getting rid of the fear. And so perhaps what we'll do is we'll wrap this discussion just with a little kind of footnote. Oh, if you are interested between now and our next workshop, I've got homework for everybody. Yeah, here's everybody's homework. I encourage you to watch the TED Talk by Carol Dweck on growth mindset. TED Talk on growth mindset by Carol Dweck. And just sort of see what that does for your thinking about these sorts of topics and things. And we'll try to get Joe Bowler. Thank you. Beth has just posted the link to the TED Talk. So check that out, and really take it to the heart. This is growth mindset is really different than the sort of positivity, the positive just sort of psychology, just sort of saying you're good, yay for you, hooray, here's a bunch of positive things that I'm going to say about you. That was kind of for a while kind of an approach that people were taking, like I should just say nice things about people and then they will feel good about themselves. But then kids very quickly got onto the fact that like they don't really mean it, or that there's kind of an insincerity to it, because they would look at the kid would like I don't really feel this is a great picture, and then the grown-up would look at it like, that's wonderful, that's the most beautiful picture I've seen, that's wonderful, good for you, hooray for you. And they realized that they're just kind of passing out medals to everybody. And so the growth mindset allows you actually to be really positive and really, really encouraging, but with stepping stones to kind of direct you towards the behavior that makes you better, right? So it's not just you have a fixed trait, oh, good for you, you're great, right? Because on a lot of these things I look at it and I go like, no, I'm not, right? The growth mindset gives you direction of how to kind of approach and build these things and kind of keep a positive frame of mind. So you end up with a positive frame of mind and kind of a can-do attitude. And that's huge. If we can instill that in our students. Right, so there's your homework.
So I just shared a graphic that I've shared before in the Facebook group. It's actually designed for musicians. It's the last link I just posted in the chat. It's designed for musicians, but it's perfect for nature journaling also. And I think it actually would be a cool thing to have someone like Akshay or Mark Simmons illustrate with nature journaling messages, because it's pretty similar. But it really is an image that describes this growth mindset and talks about if you have a fixed mindset, the talent is set, you avoid challenges, you give up easily, you see effort as bad, you ignore critique, and it kind of explains that. And then what you do if you have a growth mindset in those same situations. And I found it really helpful to actually print it out and put it on my wall, because I find it really useful reminders, because it's not, it's broken down into kind of pieces of the growth mindset, seeing effort as critical, keeping trying, seeking challenges, pursuing critiques, feeling inspired by other people's successes. I think that's a really great one, especially in that journal sharing moment when you're giving feedback to students and I think you do a great job of reminding that when you're teaching those classes, Jack, about being inspired by other people instead of jealous, that it's really easy for us to fall into that pit of jealousy and despair that, oh my God, I can never do a page that beautiful or whatever you're envious about of another person. But seeing that as inspiration with ideas you can steal, I think is really important. So I just wanted to share that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Beth. Yeah, that is, I love the idea of getting, let's stick Mark Simmons on that. I'll talk to him today.
I can talk to him.
You want to talk to him about it?
Yeah, I can talk to him about it.
See, that's going to be. We
can make our own poster.
We'll make our own poster.
Can he have his Jack Law's little, superhero on it? Is that okay?
you try to. I would say we don't want to have any restraint on what he does. We'll see what he comes up with there.
No person?
The what?
Is that what you said? No person on what he does?
No. I think we don't want any constraints on
Okay.
on Mark, and he can do whatever he think gets the message across in the most dynamic, exciting way.
Cool.
Maybe bonus points if there are some dinosaurs.
Okay. Bonus points for dinosaurs. All right. I will talk to him about that.
That's great. All right. So the format of these Wednesday talks, it's going to be really different than the Tuesdays and Thursdays, which are more about how to draw. But if you're interested in more of this, this is going to be the regular thing for Wednesdays. They're probably just a small, the number of people who are kind of hardcore, educators and homeschooling parents, I think it's smaller than our general population. So these will be more of kind of open discussions. And I want to invite you folks to tune in again on other Wednesdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays are more specific drawing techniques. And I want to thank everybody for showing up and joining us. It's really good to see you folks.
If I've noticed some more questions have come into the chat, but they're on slightly different subjects. Should I send those to you a bit later, or because I noticed some really good questions about, like Kara asked a question about working with kids who are 9 and younger, which seems like which would be I think a really good topic in itself. And then some other things about going beyond, I noticed, and I wonder, it reminds me of pursuing answers and such. Should I be compiling these questions to give to you later for future topics?
That's a great idea. So so why don't we, what I'll do is for the, maybe we can, for the next couple of workshops, on one of them, have the topic be, would be answering questions, and another would be drawing with really young children. Would that be of interest to folks?
It would be interesting to see, Jack, for example, maybe there are some kindergartners usually engage in those kinds of things a lot through their their exploration and the program, the way the program is organized. But as soon as kids move to primary, at least in the area where I live, it seems that they're starting to lose that. They lose that exploration time. And it seems that I'm teaching grade 2, and I just said they already believe they can't draw and they can't do anything. They don't know, so I think that's a very interesting idea to look at maybe 7, 8, 9-year-olds and see how to engage them. And maybe even if we could think of together some activities, how to start it, because I'm a little scared to start because I'm afraid they're just gonna run, everywhere, and I'm just not gonna find them because I'm not exactly sure how to structure it in a way that it's purposeful, fully purposeful, and it's safe, and it sort of has a trajectory, where it's going.
Yes, I absolutely understand what you're saying. I have a download for you.
Ooh.
Have you downloaded How to Teach Nature Journaling yet?
Your book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So there's a section in there on introductory activities.
Okay.
And there's really good some strategies and some thinking about a lot of those sorts of things. Kind of the first kind of working with students, and how to build those. What are activities that have kind of a really good track record of getting people started and keeping them engaged. So I would say first thing on that would be to look at that chapter on getting started, or introductory nature journaling activities.
I was reading, but I know that you said that the focus is mostly for a little bit older kids, for grade 4 and up.
What I find is that once, so I have, in kindergarten, a lot of the drawing that students do, and some also in first grade, it is more of a symbolic drawing. You know, this is a symbol and it means my house. And the kid can live in a rectangular apartment building, but they'll draw a house with a peaked roof because that's the symbol, with a little chimney with a curl coming out of it, because that's a symbol that means house. They've got a symbol that means person, a symbol that means tree, and they'll draw the bird symbol next to the sun symbol. And when you get to about second grade, that's where a lot of the representational drawing, where I'm trying to actually draw that cat, starts to come in. And that's the point where a lot of kids peel off of drawing, where they kind of go like, you know, I can't draw, because they realize that their symbol doesn't really look like the real thing. And so the science journaling and the nature journaling, I think, is actually a very good thing to introduce at that level, because it gets them looking again at the real object, but without having to make a pretty picture of that. So last year I taught a second and third grades at my daughter's school, taught them nature journaling, and used those exact same activities with second graders, and it works great. So interestingly, I use those same activities also with students at Stanford University. So the second graders and the Stanford University students did the same activities, and they both had a ball and came out with good journaling pages. With the Stanford University students, they're bringing higher level things to it, but anything that gets you out in the field, kind of engaging with these real phenomena, and documenting it, and then looking down at your page, good things are going to happen. So this does work, and it has been tested and field tested with second graders.
Okay, thank you. I will look again. Thank you so much, Jack.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody who joined us today. I want to encourage everybody to stay safe, be kind, and look for ways that you can share this skill of nature journaling with other people in your community. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for folks who participated. And I also want to, Ivea, thank you very much for being willing to help with moderating and wrangling this group. I saw you added a number of people in, and you were watching things behind the scenes. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and thanks for your patience.
Jack, just to let you know, I emailed you something about my class. If you could get to it sometime soon, that'd be great.
All right, I actually have been off of my email, so don't feel that that you're being ignored.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to let you know.
I'll look for that. And is this an online class that you're teaching?
Yeah, we're looking into doing it online, yeah. Because that's the best way right now.
That's great. So I also will, are you currently on my list on my website of nature journaling teachers? Okay, we can add you in there if you feel comfortable being there. And
yeah,
we can also help promote your class. So Amaya is doing a lot of really wonderful work as sort of an ambassador of nature journaling and helping encourage young people to do this, and she's really stepped up. She sort of makes herself, she's honest, authentic, vulnerable, and engaging, and really does. I've seen her with young people, just wonderful stuff. So I'm happy to help you as much as I can make that be a success. And if it
Thank
gets
you.
really huge, then we can kind of get you onto a larger Zoom platform. Or if you want to do classes that are longer than the 45 minutes, we can talk about that so I can help you be able to do what you want to do. All right. Thank you, everybody.